In this video, we're going to be ranking every fight in Avatar and making a tier list out of it. So we're going to be going chronologically, starting from the Sozin versus Roku fight. So I think this fight's really cool, and it's short, so it's not going to be super high up on the tier list. But I think B tier is good for now. I might move it down later. And next up, we've got Zuko versus Aang. This fight is also really cool. It's the first time we ever see the Avatar state used, and it's a really good way to just show off how scary it really is. And it shows the power of Aang. All we really see him do up to that point is just airbend. This is the first time he ever water bends. So I think this is a better fight just because it's in the second episode, I believe. So that's just a really cool way to start off the show. So yeah, I think A tier is fine. Next up, we've got Zuko versus Zhao, the first fight that they have. I actually think this is like the worst fight in the entire show. So they reused this one animation 3 times, and then they reused this other one twice. And so I think they just cut a lot of corners, probably because it's like one of the first episodes of the show, and they probably couldn't spend a lot of time and money on just this one little fight. I think they should have spent more time on it though, because there's no medium shots of like both of them fighting. Well, there's some, but it's mostly just up close shots of each of them firebending, and so it's not very fun to watch. It's also a really bad way to show what an Agni Kai is. Like, there's so many more that they could have shown first, like when Zuko gets his face burned, or the final battle with Azula and Zuko. Those are such better representations of what an Agni Kai is, and this is just really lame, and it feels like there's no high stakes to it. So yeah, this is definitely D tier. Next up, we've got Bumi versus Aang. This is like the first fight that we see where someone goes all out earthbending, so it's pretty cool to see how balanced the elements really are. And it's also a really cool surprise to see Bumi ripped. You were definitely not expecting that your first time watching the show. And it only shows a fraction of what Bumi can actually do, but still makes him seem really cool because he's so far ahead of Aang. But yeah, he can go even further than this, and even just this small scale battle is fun to watch. Okay, I'm gonna move Sozin versus Roku down to C tier, and I'll move these two down to B tier. And next up, we've got Jet versus Aang. It's not anything crazy, but it does show a few new moves from Aang, like this spiral wind that he shoots at him. We haven't really seen him do like a full-on wind blast at someone. And also, I think it might have the hardest hit in all of Avatar, when Aang just literally almost dies right here. I don't think this is as fun to watch as Sozin versus Roku, but it is a decent fight. Next up, we've got Zuko versus Aang. This is definitely, I think, the first actual like really good fight of the show. The choreography is super cool, and Aang, we just see all of his skill. It's a nice rematch between them from this other fight when Zuko didn't really get a chance to fight back, and it shows just how strong they really are compared to each other. And it's the first wider scale battle with multiple characters, like June is also in it, and Katara, and they all play a good part in it. There's also funny gags in between, like with Iroh. I just really like this fight. Next up, we've got Zuko versus Zhao. This is another bad fight. All the Zhao fights are pretty bad. Zhao is meant to be one of the main villains of this season. Aang just takes him out like he's nothing. Zhao is just super dumb. He just sets fire to his whole ship. I get that that's what the episode was trying to tell us, that he's just irresponsible and doesn't care what happens with his fire, but he still should be like a bigger villain, someone that's more scary, but this just makes him look like a joke. Next up, we've got Appaku versus Katara. I think this is an even better fight. There's so many cool uses of waterbending in it, so I think this is definitely top of A tier. Yeah, there's not really much more to say about that. It's just a really cool fight. Next up, we've got Zhao versus Zuko, the rematch. This is an actual good fight with Zhao. Zuko gets his rightful win instead of when Zhao comes back and attacks him. And the style of the fight is really cool. It reminds me of the last Agni Kai with Azula and Zuko, with everything else grayed out. And I think that's just a really cool choice. And also Zhao dies, so that's a plus, because I don't think anyone ever has liked him ever. So yeah, this is a good fight. I think it's either bottom of A tier or top of B. I'll put it bottom of A just because the style is really cool. Next up, we've got Azula's crew versus Aang's crew. One funny part, Aang jumps up like 10 stories and is obviously an airbender, and then he starts flying with his glider, and Azula still doesn't notice anything, and then his little hat falls off and reveals his arrow, and that's when she's onto him. So I just think that part is really funny. I think this is kind of not the greatest fight. They could have had such a cool fight with the scaffolding, like running through it and stuff, but they kind of just leave it instantly. I think that this fight had a lot more potential, but it's not that great. The whole fight is basically them just sliding down the little delivery chutes, and I think that's less fun to watch than the jet fight was. Okay, next up we've got Toph versus the wrestlers. She uses the dust cloud so well, and it shows like how good Earthbender can actually be. I feel like Earthbending is really underrated in the first season, and you don't really see much of it, but in the second season, it just goes crazy, and Toph is so badass, and she's one of the best characters, and this is her introduction, and it's just a really great fight. So yeah, definitely top of A tier. Next up, we've got Zuko versus Gao. It shows lots of character development from Zuko. We see him get really frustrated and lash out and end up using firebending when he's supposed to be undercover, and it's just a really cool way to end the fight. And also, Gao uses like his hammers to hit the ground and earthbend with it. We don't really see that as much as I think we should have. Yeah, this is a really cool fight. I think top of B tier probably. Next up, we've got Azula versus the whole Aang gang. It shows how strong Azula is, and she's like the main villain of season 2. This is like a much better way to set up how scary she is than this other fight. And it's also really cool to see them all team up and work together, but it's not super crazy. I think it's on the higher end of B tier, probably around the Boomy fight. I think I actually like the Boomy fight a little bit more, so I'll put it right here. And next up, we've got Azula versus Aang at the drill. I actually love this fight. It's so cool to see Aang run up that wall, and I wish he wouldn't have run back down. I wish he would have just dropped down, but it's still really cool. And then he also uses like his earth arm to fight against her. His earthbending has improved a ton. I think this is like the first time we really see him use it in a fight, and he uses it really cool, and he kind of destroys Azula. I think it's actually top of B tier. Next up, we've got the Dai Li and Wang Fang versus Aang and the Freedom Fighters, and then Jet also fights against Aang. I don't really like this fight that much. Jet dies in a pretty lame way. He just gets one shot by Wang Fang, and also I feel like they didn't build enough of an attachment to Jet to care about his death. He's like the only death in Avatar, and it's kind of wasted. I think it's probably top of D tier. Next up, we've got the Crystal Catacombs fight. I love this fight. It's like super sad. It's how they end the season, and it's just awful to see like how many sad things they build up. Like, you're disappointed from Zuko joining Azula, and Aang is sad that he has to give up Katara, and then Aang does give up Katara, and he goes into the Avatar state, and then he nearly dies, and then Iroh's sad because Zuko betrayed him. So it's just a horribly sad fight, and it's how they end the season. But it has such cool uses of bending, like by far the coolest that we've seen in the whole show. There's so many new things that we haven't seen before with pretty much every character, like Katara and Zuko and Aang. They all use such cool things, and it's also in the Crystal Catacombs, which look really cool. I think this is the best fight so far, and we'll put it S tier. Next up, we've got Sokka versus Piandao, the first big fight of season 3, and it's also one of the only big non-bending fights. I love how Sokka improves so much. He doesn't really have a place in their group as a fighter. He's like more of a strategist. He's always just kind of made a joke out of, like, he'll run at someone with his boomerang and just instantly get dropped. But it's actually cool to see him with his sword and adding to Team Avatar in the way that he wants to. So yeah, there's just a lot of character growth with Sokka, and he almost beats Piandao somehow. So yeah, I really like this fight. I think it's near the higher end of B tier. Next up, we've got all the Combustion Man fights. I didn't want to do them separately because that would just make this tier list really bloated when they're all fairly the same. The first one is my favorite one though. It has just really cool scene with this exploding thing, and then Aang airbends away from it. It's also the first use of unique bending that we see, like a rare bending style, which is combustion bending. And Combustion Man is super scary, probably one of the scariest villains that we had seen so far. And the animation is just really cool in pretty much every fight with him. So this is definitely, I think, top of A tier almost. I'm actually going to move this below, so I feel like this is just a cooler style fight. And next up, we've got Hama versus Katara. The next use of a rare bending style that we see, it shows a lot of growth with Katara. Like, she's actually able to fight against Hama, who should be basically unstoppable. It's really scary, probably the scariest fight that we've seen. It's super dark and eerie, and it introduces bloodbending, which is super cool, and it ends on like a really sad note with Katara being able to bloodbend when she doesn't want to. It might be S tier. I want to save S tier for the best of the best, so we'll put it top of B. Okay, so next up we've got Zuko versus Ozai. It's not much of a fight, but the lightning in it is so cool. Like, it's the fastest charge up that we see of lightning bending, and so it just gives us a glimpse of how powerful Ozai is, and then Zuko's able to redirect it and beat him pretty much. It's really short, but I love this fight. I'm not going to put it S tier because of how short it is, but I will put it just below Hama. And next up, we've got the gondola fight. It's a decent fight. There's a lot of different fights going on during it. It's high stakes because they're over the boiling lake, so just one little slip and someone's dead. There's one thing that I really kind of hate about it though. Sokka is like absolutely useless. Like, he just had this great fight with Piandao and now he's reduced to this. He literally has Azula like inches from death. All he has to do is jab forward a tiny bit and then like the whole Azula fighting arc is just over. But he's for some reason retreats when he has her and she's like backed up against the edge and is almost gonna fall off, but he just gives up. And then later the gondola tilts a little bit and he nearly falls off and kills both him and Zuko. So I hate that part about this fight. And just for that, I'm gonna put it C tier. Like, it's a decent fight, but it just makes Sokka's character go back so much when he was just doing so well. Next up, we got the airship fight. I think this is also really high stakes. Every fight when they're in the air is really cool. And also, Zuko does a sick jump and it shows Azula nearly die and it convinces you that she has like no way back, like she's just going to die, but then she manages to survive and it shows how persistent she is. So I'll put it B tier, just above this fight. Next up, we've got the airship fight with Toph. This fight's super cool, just to see how badass Toph is again. And Sokka's also a super great leader and he protects her. It's super high stakes and it's like intense the entire way through with the airship slice and Toph not being able to see but kind of having to carry them through because she's an earthbender and metalbender. Yeah, this fight's pretty great. I think top of A tier. It's like super close to being S tier, but I think just these next ones are ahead of it a bit. So we've got the last Agni Kai, Zuko versus Azula. This is like the most beautiful fight in the show. It reminds me a lot of the Zhao one with the gray and like how vivid the firebending is. And it's like the first comet enhanced fight. So it's the largest scale that we've seen. Azula goes insane, which is fun to watch. We see like her descent into madness. But Katara is super stupid and she stands on the sidelines. Like, obviously Azula's not going to play by the rules and then she doesn't, as we expect, and Zuko has to save her. That's also something that makes the fight really cool though, because he sacrifices himself for her. So I really love this fight. It's definitely S tier. It's like the best fight so far. And then we have Katara trying to make up for her mistake. This use of waterbending is one of the coolest that we've seen. I really like this fight. It's not as good as Zuko versus Azula, but it is cool. Katara just destroys her. She outwits her. But yeah, it's pretty short. And then we also see Azula fully go insane at the end. Not quite S tier. I'm gonna put it below the airship one because it's kind of just the aftermath of Zuko versus Azula. Alright, so we've got the final fight, Ozai versus Aang. I can't explain how just insane and perfect this fight is. I think it's by far the best fight in any show ever. This is just the best fight ever created. It's just a masterpiece. Even just like the start of it, the vibe is insane, where Ozai does his giant fire blast and Toph can feel the heat of the fire. Like, it just sets up to be amazing. It shows Ozai stronger than anyone we've ever seen. He's like the scariest villain yet, even further than what our expectations were. Aang just gets completely destroyed. Like, he's just running the whole time, and then he redirects Ozai's lightning and Ozai sees his life flash before his eyes, but then Aang decides not to kill him, and then after that he just almost dies and gets like heated in the oven thing. But then Aang comes back and goes in the avatar state and is even scarier than Ozai somehow. Like, it's just by far the coolest fight. Also, I love the blowtorch sound effect that it has. Like, every time they do a firebending blast, it does this noise that's so cool. Just everything about it is perfect, and it's by far the best fight ever. I think some people even think that Azula versus Zuko is better, but I feel like it's not even really close. I'm gonna put these in S tier still because I do still love these fights, but Ozai versus Aang is just by far the best. And also the energy bending at the end is so cool. If you haven't seen this fight in a while, you have to go back and rewatch it because it's just amazing. But yeah, that's the end of the tier list. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure to smash that like button and commit first degree murder on that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video.